From a top secret network of highly secure locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider Podcast, brought to you by Taco Palenque, where the best happy hour in San Antonio just got happier. Stop by any of the Taco Palenque locations Sunday through Thursday for ice-cold $5.50 margaritas, $3 domestics, $3 off ponchos, and $1 off panchitos. Taco Palenque keeps San Antonio cool and well-fed and is the best pre- or post-game meal for watching the Spurs. Soon we'll be watching the Spurs. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by the panel of Spurs beat writers for the Express News, Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn. Sports editor Nick Talbot is with us this week. And I'm going to start off by, we have Media Day and Training Camp coming up next week. Tom Orsborn was not with us last time when we had a special guest, but I want to ask Tom Orsborn, did your time off compare to what Victor Wembanyama has been experiencing on his time off the past month through San Antonio?
Yeah, I've been off the last couple of weeks, and I went to my usual vacation spot, Mark, Texas. Little town of 2,000 in Central Texas, where my wife's family is from. We had a great time up there, but I was checking Twitter every now and then. I'm seeing Wemby's here, there, everywhere. He's in Southtown. He's at the Missions with Manu. It's incredible, all the places that he went. I was really jealous, but I had a good time in the country, but just not as exciting as Wemby.
Jeff, does it feel like, have you been monitoring the Wemby travails over the past month?
I have. It's all over my social media, and I don't know. Like, I know you guys think of me as just like really young and hip and with it and current and like just in tune with the modern generation of teenagers, but I occasionally I just sort of have to roll my eyes at some of this. Just the influx.
Why is that?
Just the influx everywhere of this guy with a cowboy hat on, tooling around. I realize this is a me problem. It's a me problem. This is a me issue. Like there's no real issue with Victor being the man about town, but it just seems so staged and stage managed that I don't know. I roll my eyes a little, but that's because I'm an old man.
This is controversial.
That's because I'm an old man. It has nothing to do with that. That's just the way things are now, and I just have to get used to it. But I'm the old guy yelling at clouds. Where I'm seeing this, and I'm like, well, Tim Duncan never put on a cowboy hat and tooled through Southtown. Like that doesn't happen.
Well, so what you're saying is you don't have a TikTok?
Is that what the young people are calling a clock these days? I have no idea what that is.
Along the lines of what Jeff was saying, I had to roll my eyes. I saw someone on Twitter, a Spurs fan, responding to Victor being in the Southtown bar with the cowboy hat on, saying, has there ever been a Spurs rookie who's embraced San Antonio more than Victor Wembanyama? And I'm thinking, yeah, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker, and they did it very spontaneously. It wasn't staged. They just embraced it. So we have short memories, some of us.
I tell you what, this Spurs Insider Podcast, we're causing a stir here. Trashing Victor Wembanyama for staging his love of San Antonio. I just want to go on the record. The host of this podcast is not saying that at all. It's the B writers who are suggesting that some of this might not be totally organic and genuine. I think it is. How can you fake that kind of love of a city? I think he's jumping both feet into this.
It's driven me back to MySpace. You don't see any of this on MySpace. Victor Wembanyama does not exist on MySpace.
There's Jeff mentioned the cowboy hat, and this thought came to mind because I've been writing college football columns during the Spurs offseason. Like the two most click-friendly personalities in sports right now are cowboy hat-wearing guys. Like if you write a Deion Sanders, Coach Prime column, if you put any of that online, like he's got 4 of the top 7 most watched college football games of the year were Colorado games. Deion Sanders wore a cowboy hat. Okay. The most click-friendly personality in Texas sports and like worldwide, just a click powerhouse. Victor Wembanyama wears a cowboy hat. Are we starting to see a trend here? Like if Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce started wearing cowboy hat, this would just be
I've never heard of
unstoppable.
those people. Who are those people?
They're also not on MySpace, but they're a pretty big deal. These are the biggest stories in sports, and you've got cowboy hats involved here, so maybe that's a new thing. I don't know.
It's in all seriousness, I think you wrote a column. It seems like years ago now, but it was earlier this summer about how Victor and the machine around him, the hype machine, if you want to call it that, it's just going to be a different deal than we're used to in San Antonio with our star NBA players. And that's okay. It's the way things are now. Victor's going to be out there. His face is going to be everywhere. There's going to be, you're not going, I'm not, I understand that. I understand the problem is I'm a very old man and I just want to like engage with Twitter, which isn't even called Twitter anymore, the way our forefathers did, which is just,
which is just what?
Stories about George Washington and his false teeth or whatever.
I see. To continue the Deion Sanders comparison, there was his Colorado Buffaloes played the Oregon Ducks last week. It was a really big game. It was the most watched game of the week. And they showed a pregame speech from the head coach of the Oregon Ducks. His name is Dan Lanning. He invited the cameras in for his pregame speech. And Oregon is this Nike program. Before this year, if you equated a college football program with like Flash, you would think of the Oregon Ducks, which made this all the more hilarious. And Dan Lanning's pregame speech is, we're about wins, not about clicks. While he's letting like a social media team and TV cameras into his locker room to film this pregame speech. The point being, like, everybody is about clicks these days. Even the coach who is railing against the clicks. Like that,
it's all fine.
That speech about him talking about wins being more valuable than clicks got a whole lot of clicks. And this trickles down to all kinds of sports. And like what the Spurs are building, sure, some of this is not 100% authentic. Like cameras just didn't happen upon Victor Wembanyama under the I-35 bridge, hanging out with Manu Ginobili or at the Southtown bar. But like that's just the way the world works now. And for old people like Jeff, like his generation, not my generation, but Jeff's generation, that's just something you're going to have to get used to, man, sir. And I don't think it's a bad thing. It's people are getting involved. People are excited. San Antonio's, they're going out to Taco Palenque and celebrating because Victor Wembanyama's in town. I think that's a good thing. It's better than the alternative of the past couple of years when there was no hope, there was nothing interesting. Now there's something interesting. That's a good thing.
Like I said from the top, I realize it's a me problem. It's a me issue, and I'm not really that upset about it. I just kind of chuckle to myself about.
I think what you did this for. I think this tirade was all about
clicks. It's all about the clicks. Yeah. You stuffed it out.
It was a genius move by Jeff McDonald to say something semi-negative about Victor Wembanyama, and boy, the listens, the views, the clicks on this podcast are going to go to the roof.
I cannot wait how this gets aggregated or whatever. Yeah, that's going to be great.
This is our last edition of the Spurs Insider podcast before, as I mentioned before, training camp starts next week. Media Day is Monday. This will be something else that Jeff McDonald loves, and that it's going to be probably the most well-attended media day of the past decade, maybe.
I bet it's the most well-attended media day in Spurs history.
Yeah,
I bet it's the biggest zoo of a media day in Spurs history. I don't even think that's a question.
Yep. Are you going to, how far into this media day experience will you lose your mind?
I'm actually going to ask for the day off. Is that cool?
We will be returning.
Take some PTO that day.
one bit of news from that interests only the people on this podcast, probably no one else, is we're returning to the old facility on Spurs Lane for this media day, even though the training camp will start at the brand new Rocket La Cantera, the Victory Performance Center, a few miles away from the old facility, but they're having the media day festivities on the old court because they don't mind if it gets scuffed up by all the
I blame Mendez.
Members. What's that?
I blame Mendez. Blame Mendez. Mark Mendez, friend of the podcast. KSAT cameraman extraordinaire. He would totally tear up the new place if they let him on the floor there. Clearly.
Well, there you go. How do you think Greg Popovich handles this circus that's coming?
Oh, do you remember last year how he was so awesome? So awesome, had bits, had jokes.
Because no one cared.
Actually pleased to be there. I think he talked for 20 minutes. Yeah, it's going to be the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. Yes. Last year
we're back to this.
Last year he opened media day by making all the quote unquote jokes that were just him being completely honest. When he says no one should bet on this team to win the championship, I don't know who these guys are. On down the line. Now there's some expectations, and nobody expects them to win a championship this year, but much different mentality for your local Cagers this year heading into this camp than a year ago. Because I think there are fans who do expect, whether this is realistic or not, a playoff berth, a winning record. That would be a remarkable improvement for a team that was as bad as it was last year. But there are going to be expectations, and the more the hype builds, the bigger those expectations are going to be. And Monday will be our first glimpse at how not just Victor Wembanyama, but everybody around the team deals with that.
Just going back to your Pop question, I think he's going to quickly grow tired of answering questions from strangers, if that makes sense. I think he's gotten used to just talking to the Express News, and there's just going to be people he doesn't know everywhere asking him questions again. I think that's going to throw him off. That's my prediction.
Not that he loves the questions from the Express News.
No, but he just loves the familiarity, and the give and take, and he knows what we're about. Some numbnuts that he doesn't know lobbing a question, and it's going to happen everywhere all year. Gone are the days where it's me and Pop post game in Memphis by ourselves. Yeah, those are gone. Where it's going to be it's a new era for us too.
Yep.
Maybe he could help us get some of the French reporters used to the city. I've been inundated with questions, texts from our French journalists asking about the city, and there's at least two of them that are moving here full time, and of course we have a ESPN reporter moving here full time. But it's really, that's just a sign, just kind of underscores how different it's going to be with new faces and a lot of different questions thrown at Pop.
I guess we could, before media day gets here, before training camp gets here, just the lingering team on-court related questions that are going to be at the forefront when camp starts. We've talked about it before, but there still needs to be a couple of cuts made, either through waivers or I guess trades could happen. But the Spurs have 17 guaranteed contracts they enter training camp with. I believe they need to cut that down to 15. We've said many times before on this podcast that I think number one candidate to get dropped is your Kem Birch, who's never played a game in the Spurs uniform, even though he was acquired in the middle of last season. And then there'll be another one. And it sounds like there's going to be, Jeff's had some stories in the newspaper over the past couple of weeks from some of the non-Victor Wembanyama type players who could contribute this year. But do you have any insight on that battle for the last couple of spots Jeff?
I'm glad you brought this up, because a few moments before logging on to this podcast, I was working on my story on Cedi Osman, who I spoke to last week. So that will be in your Express News and expressnews.com, and maybe in your Spurs Nation newsletter coming up. It might be out after this podcast. By the time this podcast drops, that stuff might be out. So you can check that out. But yeah, I think that last spot's going to be interesting, and it kind of depends on, because you got your Cedi Osmans, you got your Reggie Bullocks in that mix. Do you want to go to keep veterans for that last spot? Do you just let your young guys roll? Kind of depends on what you're looking for in that spot. I think the not to go too far behind the scenes, but the reason I spoke to Cedi Osman is I reached out to the Spurs and said, hey, I'd like to talk to at least one of the new guys that you guys traded for this offseason. Either this was a few weeks ago, maybe like a campaign, Cedi Osman, Reggie Bullock, and Chedi's the guy they gave me. So I don't know if that tells you anything. And then of course, campaign was waived a couple days after I sent that initial text, so it became obvious why he wasn't offered to me. But so I think that's one clue as to what they think of Cedi Osman and where they might go in that direction.
There's also a dynamic of you acquire all three of the guys that you mentioned there: Campaign, Reggie Bullock, Cedi Osman, were kind of acquired for salary reasons, to acquire other pieces. They weren't necessarily added because the Spurs said, hey, we need Reggie Bullock on our team, or we need Campaign on our team. There were other factors at play. And if you're looking to see who makes the team out of that group, could one factor be which of these guys most wants to be here?
Yeah. I think sort of, you can read this in the Cedi Osman piece that I'm writing, but yeah, he's very excited to be here. He kind of felt like his time was up in Cleveland. He when they told him he was traded the Spurs, like, this is a place where like the Europeans like to be. The Spurs have a reputation for really knowing how to use those guys. Of course, Pop is a huge draw to someone like Cedi, and he sees an opportunity to kind of be at least for a year, be a part of the rebuilding process here in San Antonio. Like, he kind of went through it all in Cleveland. He played all 6 of his seasons in Cleveland so far, and like his first year they go to the finals. Then LeBron leaves, and they're one of the worst teams in the league, losing 19 games. And then they rebuilt it to over the span of 4 or 5 years, where last season, Cleveland won 51 games and was in the playoffs. So Cedi had been there for all of that, and kind of sort of he'd be a nice veteran voice to keep around if the Spurs decide to go that way. So are we saying, it's Reggie Bullock out the door, or try to trade him or something? I don't know.
Devontae Graham, he'll be on the bubble too.
Yeah, he'll be on the bubble. Are we assuming all those young players they signed and re-signed this offseason are absolutely safe? Like, God forbid, is Mamu on the bubble?
Charles Bassey.
What does Charles Bassey look like coming back off that knee injury? I think they have options, but I feel like they're probably in a situation where they'd rather roll the dice with younger players than veterans, as long as they keep some of the veterans around, and they still have McDermott around, and they'll surely keep at least one of two of Cedi and Bullock. So that's that. Like, that'll be one of the storylines for camp too.
Another one that I can already anticipate the disdain with which Greg Popovich will greet this question, which will get asked at some point, and he will provide absolutely no insight on it. He will hate it, but he's going to be asked about his starting lineup at some point, and he's never divulged any details on that unless it's 90 minutes before a game, and even then, sometimes he doesn't divulge details on it. But if Victor Wembanyama is going to start the season at power forward, and yes, we're in an age of the NBA where the game is positionless, and it doesn't really matter what identifier you put next to a player's position. But if he's not going to be if he's going to play alongside another center, and if Zach Collins is going to be that guy, then somebody who started a bunch of games last year is not going to start some games this year for your local Cagers, and that's going to be something that I'll be watching in the preseason just to see how that's navigated, because you have really good teammate type players that are up for this bench spot, like whether it's Keldon Johnson. Everybody loves Keldon Johnson, just the ultimate team guy. Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell. Like, one of those guys might be coming off the bench this year. And that's going to take some, like, you go back to Manu Ginobili. Manu Ginobili didn't love it when Greg Popovich told him you're coming off the bench. Manu wanted to start. All these guys want to start. But Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I know nothing about nothing, but the thought of Keldon Johnson just wreaking havoc on other teams' second units sounds like something that might be worth exploring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I think he could do a lot of damage, you know, as going against lesser players. I mean, not to say he didn't do damage as a starter, but I just think that could be a thing that helps everybody involved. I don't know what else you do. Who else is a candidate to come off the bench out of that group?
I see Stohan coming off the bench. Don't see that at all. In fact, he may end up, you know, being the point. That's the question mark too. Is, you know, does he handle the ball a lot, or? But Keldon's on the record as saying that he wants to come off. He doesn't mind coming off the bench. So sounds like the good soldier that would do it. And as you pointed out, Jeff, probably thrive at it.
Yep. There's still the idea of, you know, all these guys have some pride. That would take some pride swallowing. Like, Keldon started a lot of games for this team over the years.
Yes. Yes.
And, you know, like I said, Manu did love it, embraced it. We will see if one of these guys does it. And it could be a thing where this is all moot and Victor Wembanyama ends up starting at the 5 alongside Trey Jones and Devin Vassell.
I think to start the season, I would put Wemby and Zach Collins in the starting lineup almost in cement to start the season, and then we'll see how it goes. But opening night, I'd be shocked if it was anyone but those two at the 4-5.
I think you're probably right. It's a lot to look forward to. Jeff's going to go crazy within the next week and a half. Tom eventually will be closer. He's still in a secure location that is not.
Yeah,
Tom's still in a secure location that is not as secure as usual, which is why you haven't been able to maybe hear him as well. Our producer, Monty Bach, doing the best that he can. He's got his work cut out for him this week. If Tom sounds like, when you're listening to this podcast, that he's in the same room as us, Monty has performed a miracle, because we're really struggling to hear Tom this week. Just shaking off those vacation cobwebs. He's going to be back with us in full force next week. Okay. I'm just saying, a lot of work for our producer this week. I'm sure he'll do a great job. I'm sure Tom will do a great job when he comes back. I cannot make any guarantees if Jeff will keep his sanity through this training camp, let alone an entire season.
I can make you some guarantees.
About
we should all wear cowboy hats.
That I will not.
You heard Tom there. Tom suggests we all wear cowboy hats to media day. I will not be doing that. Jeff might wear his Kangol, but yeah, there's anticipation in the air. There's expectations. That's a good thing. We will be back on a regular basis moving forward. The Spurs Insider Podcast, sponsored by Taco Palenque. We're going to try to record. We're going to do our best. We can't make a guarantee. We're going to do our best to be in your podcast player of choice every Wednesday this season. You know, we'll see how it goes, but we're going to try. What else can you ask for? In the meantime, take care of each other.
My podcast. Oh, I stepped all over it, didn't I?
You stepped all over it.
My podcast player of choice. My podcast player of choice is MySpace.
Well, there you go. That, I don't know if that was
all
worth
right. Drop the tagline. Let's get out of here.
I don't know if that was worth stepping over my outro.
What was
We'll
it?
do better
Let's
next
drop it.
time.
Let's get out of here.
Take care of each other and keep it real.
Whoa.